hour, Donald Trump remains ahead in Pennsylvania by 19,000 votes. He is now down in Georgia by 1,100, but there are 3,900 military votes to be counted. He's down in Nevada by 12,000, down in Arizona by 47,000. My friends in Arizona tell me he's going to win there. We'll keep you posted throughout the show. I was on NBC News last night discussing what is going on. Here is that clip.
Latino. And Hugh Hewitt, host of the Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network. Hugh, let me go to you. And I don't know if you tapped into our conversation before the last commercial break, talking about Republicans not necessarily surrounding the president and having his back on this issue of election fraud that he alleges. What are your thoughts about that? And how's this going to play out?
Well, Lester, within the hour of our going on the air, I spoke with a senior member of the House Republican leadership, and they are very supportive of the president, but I want to explain why that is. They have made extraordinary gains in their views. NBC is projecting 209 Republican seats. They believe they could have 212, maybe 214. Mike Garcia in California, 25, has just moved ahead. And they are very, very grateful for what Chuck pointed out. The president mobilized the base that turned out to elect numbers that they were not expecting. And the Democratic caucus, by the way, had a very contentious call today. They have a civil war on their hands within that caucus. So they are supportive of what he's done. They're extremely supportive of his message that if you listen to the entire presentation the president made this afternoon, or at 6:30 p.m., is that 2020 is a year that is going to live in polling infamy. It is suppression in the eyes of the Republicans, and they agree wholeheartedly with the president that the polling errors, which were systemic errors that are built-in bias apparently now, suppress their votes, suppress their contributors, and suppress the ability to win even more seats. So they support the president's meta messaging, not just for this election, but for the coming election, that big money and big media is against the party.
How does that all? Yeah. Okay.
Can I speak for our polling a minute here? And I understand Hugh's. No, I understand Hugh is talking about what the president's supporters believe. But I can tell you about our polls. There is nothing about that. Nobody is intentionally weighting them incorrectly, whether it's in the NBC Wall Street Journal or Marist that we have used as polling. And I just want to get that out there. I understand that people want to make some of these accusations. And I know Hugh's not making that accusation. Hugh, I know you're not. But I do want to just clarify there that that is not – I have yet to work with a polling firm that has acted or done that.
Well, be that as it may, Hugh, I was just going to ask you about sort of the intellectual inconsistency there, for lack of a better way to put it. I mean, you're saying the polls are wrong, and therefore they've suppressed and depressed your voters, and your voters didn't turn up because they were too depressed about the polling that said you were behind. Well, that's one thing. But he's saying, but also there was fraud. I mean, which one is it? Because saying that the polls depressed his voters so they didn't show up is essentially acknowledging that he appears to have gotten fewer votes.
Well, Secretary Clinton said to me in an interview after her loss, you can hold two thoughts. There can be both systemic bias in the polling, which is not intentional, and Chuck is right. I don't believe it's intentional. I believe it's systemic. That is the same argument that goes to other issues as to whether or not you intend to be wrong or whether you are simply wrong. This year was the worst year in polling history with the most significant effects. They are not, however, agreeing with the assertion that fraud has been proven anywhere, but they are open to it, and they want the spotlight to be thrown on irregularities and especially on non-transparency. And the president mentioned that this afternoon as well, or at 6:30, that in Philadelphia, the Republicans won a lawsuit because the transparency was not being forthcoming. There have been not just anecdotes, but a fairly long string of anecdotes about lack of transparency.
Fair enough. Isn't there a difference, though, between saying we should have transparency, we want to make sure the votes are counted and counted fairly and only legal votes, and saying I was cheated and I really won this election? I mean, there is a big, vast chasm of difference between those two statements.
He didn't say I was cheated and I won this election. He said they're going to fight to make sure that every legal vote is counted. And as the leader of a party that depends upon honesty in vote tabulation and polling, he's being applauded by Republicans. So I just wanted, you asked me about what do the Republicans believe. They believe he is fighting a very good fight. They will not agree with every assertion he makes. I certainly haven't seen any evidence of fraud, but I have seen evidence of systemic bias in polling, not intentional. but it's overwhelming, and it does suppress Republican turnout.
Let me just say a word about the transparency issue, because the Philadelphia County Board of Elections put out a statement tonight saying that the difference in their argument was between whether the 19 Trump campaign people, the poll watchers, they were inside, they were not outside, whether those 19 people could be feet away or 10 feet away. And because of COVID, the board had wanted them to be 10 feet away. And the court ruled that they have to be allowed to be 6 feet away. They are inside, they are watching, there is no lack of transparency, and I was in Philadelphia and have been covering this whole thing and questioning all of these issues. And Pete Williams and our court people are saying the same thing. That's not what was decided by the court.
And two things just very quickly. There is... at this point, I don't know. I understand he was talking to people who are close to the president, and he's reflecting that position. I just think it's important that we say right now the preponderance of public comments about this from Republicans don't really reflect that. I mean, if you look at the way they've handled the president in the past and you compare it to what they're doing right now, they are not lining up behind him the way they often do. So that is one piece of this. The other piece of this is, I would say, there is no evidence that, Republican turnout was off the charts. More people voted for President Trump this time than voted for him in 2016. There is not any evidence that there was depressed turnout for any particular reason among Republicans. The opposite, in fact, to the point that it's how Democrats are in some ways explaining their unexpected losses. They're saying, we assumed all these new voters would vote for us, when in fact we should have assumed, actually Republicans could bring new voters into the process, because the reality is they did.
Well, and I just want to say, because Hugh, you and I had a little back and forth about this, I'm paraphrasing, but this is an actual quote from the president. He says, if you count the legal votes, I easily win. So I think that, the clear implication there is that he's saying, if I'm losing, then there must be something illegal afoot. And but we hear you, and it's we value having you on because we want to hear what folks are telling you and how Republicans are feeling about these various positions that are being taken here.
And Maria, we don't want to leave you hanging.
I don't want to.
Oh.
Yeah,
Much to unpack there, Lester. Much to unpack there, Lester. Look, listen, I think if we level with each other, I, for the last 16 years, have spent my life dedicating to increasing the vote, encouraging every single person to go out, to register, to vote. And for the first time, we see a surge in youth voters, and they are making a marked difference in Georgia. We are talking about 2,500 votes spread in Georgia, less than 10,000 in Nevada. When people say that the vote doesn't matter, this election is showing not only does it matter, but it's going to be critical to our thriving democracy. Juxtapose that to a president who is saying stop the counting in one city and saying continue the counting in another. And he's trying to delegitimize the process of our democracy in a way that every single person should just abhor. When he is saying that these votes don't count, you are talking about places that you have a Democrat and a Republican right next to each other verifying those ballots. What do you say to those individuals, those party faithfuls, when you have a Democrat and a Republican side by side, pouring their life out right now? None of us have had too much sleep, but they haven't either, with the scrutiny of not just their immediate community, but the world. And you're telling them that what they're doing is a farce? That's not only unfair, but it delegitimizes the process that we all deeply believe in. And if we are to level with each other, the moment that we stop believing in the process, that is when you actually have nefarious activity. What the president did tonight was not just an injustice to the people who stood in line, who voted despite the pandemic, the people right now that are not seeing their families because they're counting those ballots, but is a disservice to our democracy and to the office of the president. He knows better. And this is something that he was projecting long before. He was encouraging his people to vote in person because he knows that Democrats vote by mail. When he's saying that the process to stop the counting, it's in places that he knows that by court of law, that as long as there are ballots being counted and postmarked before Election Day, they count. It always has. He's trying to change the rules that have been established by Democrats and Republicans. And if it has to go to the court, that he should have the decency of saying, I don't believe that this piece of this election right here was legitimate. I'm going to take it to the courts, because you know what? He's not the first one to contest an election, but the way he's using his office is absolutely unacceptable for us. And we should demand and expect better. And I congratulate all those new voters, the people that came out, regardless of who they voted for, because that is what makes our democracy strong.
There's a little bit more to this clip, which I'll pay. I just want to know what you thought about that. 1-800-520-1234. We're talking past each other. And I think the big money, big media, big tech message that the president is delivering resonates, especially after a segment like that, where there are no questions, there are only rebuttals, because they don't believe me. And I'm just relaying what I heard. 1-800-520-1234. Give me a call.